Hey guys, welcome back to Minecraft The Lost Journals. Today, we're going to be reading chapter 16, which is titled Unnamed Helmet. It starts on page 139 and goes to page 149. If you guys have enjoyed this novel so far, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more Minecraft The Lost Journals. Without further ado, chapter 16. More mushroom soup. Allison gobbled it down, though. It seemed that nearly dying brought out her appetite. So, your house was built by his uncle, and then creepers blew it up, right? Freya said, pointing her bow between Allison and Max. They were in the crafting room, Freya checking equipment while the two of them ate. More or less, Allison said. My family raised sheep, mostly, but also pigs. Mom was an expert knitter. Dad made books that he sold to enchanters. Then, the creepers, and she shrugged. Boom. That's what creepers do. Freya finished examining the equipment. So we have a gold sword here that was enchanted with the knockback enchantment. She said, Bonebane. Max insisted. Do you know how long a gold sword lasts? It's a soft metal. Freya touched one of the tooth marks Bunny Biter had left on the blade. It's magic. It will last forever, and its name is Bonebane, Max said, though, through clenched teeth. Freya rolled her eyes. She handed Allison the enchanted helmet. This thing is also made of gold. What's wrong with iron or diamond? Do you want to name it too? Thorny or Rosy or something? No thanks, I'm good, Allison said, accepting the shiny gold helmet that had saved her life. She knew most enchantments wouldn't stop an item from breaking. Max had better bring along a backup weapon just in case. And she should get another helmet, too. Come on, we need to get some more crafting done, Freya said, gesturing to Allison. She looked at Max, frowning. If you want to try some enchanting on your own stuff, go ahead, but I'm not offering any of my equipment up for experiment. Hey, I enchanted the helmet, didn't I? Max said, offended. Allison snorted. Ask him how many failures we had. She She said to Freya. Don't need to, Freya said. Go get some metal out of that chest on the left. I figure we have enough diamond for each of us. Max pulled his uncle's journal from his bag. I need to figure some stuff out anyway, he said. He took a seat at the table next to a torch and held the journal up to the light, squinting at the angry black scrawled designs. Allison was starting to figure out that crafting was pretty easy. Really, so long as you had the right amount of incredibly rare components. Crafting equipment, anyway. She wasn't going to mess with the magic stuff. She wasn't stupid. She had no idea how Max could keep messing with enchanting when it was so much more dangerous than crafting. Max had no idea how Allison could focus on boring crafting when enchanting was so much more exciting. But he couldn't do it without her items. He didn't have the patience or interest in finding the right amount of metal or crystal in order to make useful things. He was much happier searching for fermented spider eyes to enchant already made equipment. They made a good team, he admitted. They just should probably be more honest with each other. He flipped through the book, his finger tracing the recipes he knew to be failures, and then the ones he had figured out. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but he knew the later pages, the ones with the heavy scrawled lines, held something he needed. Behind him, Allison was working at her crafting table with great enthusiasm. Freya had given her a huge amount of diamond, which Allison had never seen before, much less crafted with. She was happier than her sheep in the cove right now, and seemed to have forgotten they were stuck here in the nether, with no chance of getting home. He turned the page again and saw the thing that had constantly bothered him about this journal. There was one almost fully blacked out page. He frowned in frustration. He had been unable to decipher what was originally written or drawn. What he was supposed to do with it. What was Nicholas trying to hide? He leaned closer to the book when he heard a whoops. He was about to ask what had happened when a hot spark landed on his cheek. He yelped and jumped up, narrowly, missing a sliver of hot metal that had chipped from Allison's work. It landed on the book and immediately started to smoke. Hey, watch what you're doing, he demanded, forgetting the pain in his cheek. He lifted the book and shook it so the burning metal fell to the floor. But the damage had already been done. A few pages had been loosened from their spine, and combined with Nicholas's enthusiastic or furious scribbling, the pages were damaged enough to separate from the book and float to the floor. No, he shouted and went scrambling after the pages. Lucky for him, it wasn't windy in the nether, and the pages settled on the floor gently. He scooped them up and held them out to Freya and Allison, shaking them slightly. Be more careful next time, focusing on the pages, and now holding them up to the light. He realized that he could see more than when they had laid flat in the book. He put all but one down on the table and walked over to a torch, holding the page as close as he dared to the flame. What are you doing? Allison asked. I thought I saw something, he said, looking so closely at it that this nose bruised the page. Beyond the dark scribbling, he could see other writing, made earlier by a pen with a finer point. I thought this was a page of failed recipes, but it looks like it was a map. Allison didn't realize how stuck she'd felt simply because they hadn't known where they were going. The lack of armor and frequent injuries didn't help, of course, but those were barriers that they could overcome. But not knowing where they were going, that had been a burden on her shoulders that she didn't notice until they had a clear path. While the past path wasn't clear exactly, it was still obscured by a lot of scribbling. But once Max had figured out the main lines of a map, they had realized where Freya's fortress lay in the reference to the other things they could make out. They had a general direction they could go in. But first they had to go out the door, and there was a little issue stopping them. Max wanted to enchant his equipment. Freya stood by the door of the basement, arms crossed, leaning against the wall. Max and Allison stood at the enchanting table, Max's new diamond armor between them. Allison grasped the diamond helmet and shook it for effect. We are in the nether. We are looking for a missing man. You have a strong, new, incredibly rare set of armor, and you think that right now is the best time to start up enchanting again? It might ruin the armor. Max picked up his boots and shook them at her, mocking her movements. Yes, I think now is the best time to do it. Are we ever going to need it more than now? The way we're going, probably, Allison said. Who knows what you're going to get us into next? Allison then counted off on her fingers a list of his failed enchantments, making Max's cheeks grow hot with embarrassment. But what about your helmet? He asked, pointing to the gold helmet sitting beside her shining diamond helmet, armor, and boots. I did that one, right? True, she conceded, but for all we know, that was a fluke. You have far more failed experiments than successful ones. Max dropped the boots with a clang and walked away from the table. He stared moodily at the tacky carving on the wall. Freya stretched, and Allison got the very annoying feeling they were amusing her. Let's take the equipment we have, Allison said. Max can pack an enchanting table and whatever books and components he can carry. I can't enchant on the fly, he protested. You can't enchant at all, said Freya. That's unfair, and you know it, Max said. Look, we're not going to be mean here, Max. We're trying to save your uncle and survive in the nether. Allison said, we aren't in the woods anymore. This is serious. Max relented with bad grace and packed up his enchanting supplies while Allison and Freya packed the health potions, food, and other equipment they need. It was with our sour moods that the trio left the fortress. The nether was strangely calm as they exited through the secret door. Is this the best way to leave? Max asked. We haven't had a good luck in this canyon so far. Freya looked back. The front of the fortress is always patrolled by blazes. You ever fought a blaze? He shook his head. Then we're leaving through the right door, Freya said. Besides, we're stronger when we're together, and no one is leaving in a huff, completely unprepared for the mobs that await us. So, when we're all together, nothing attacks us, Allison commented bitterly as they stepped out into the dim nether light. There is strength in numbers, Freya said, looking around. She had an arrow nocked, ready to protect them from any attack. The canyon was quiet, with only a few bones around the bunny Biter had failed to find. She ran around now gathering them, looking at Freya, expecting her to open the door to the fortress tunnel so she could put them in her private collection. Not this time, BB, she said. Pick your favorite and let's go. The wolf blinked at her, bones in her jaws. She whined once and then ran to Freya's heels, teeth clenched around the treasures she refused to give up. Exiting the canyon, Max was finally able to look at the whole of the nether without fearing massive mobs would overtake them. The landscape unfurled before him, vast and brown, occasionally gouts of flame bursting from the cracks in the ground. In the distance, the red haze shimmered, looking like the lake that had been on Uncle Nicholas's map. Beyond that, the world looked infinite, making him feel very small. Max remembered a desert his family once traveled through back in the overworld. The sand and dunes went on, giving a false sense of safety in their mo- monotony. They had seen nothing but rabbits and more rabbits. He'd forgotten that there were dangers other than mobs, though, and discovered what those were when he wandered away from his family. With no vegetation and no streams, he quickly ran out of the food and water in the dry heat. He'd underestimated the seemingly barren and bland landscape. Then he would make the same mistake here. Even if there weren't terrifying mobs like those they'd already encountered, they wandered around the corner to see Freya's fortress properly from the front, and she was correct. Blazes still patrolled the area, throwing out an occasional fireball at each other, or random threats Max couldn't see or imagine mobs. They were still a threat, however, and Max figured it would be good to keep his distance. Freya looked at the map, which they had redrawn on fresh paper. They couldn't make out some of the areas, and Max had wanted to guess at what lay in those places, but Freya had refused. We'll map the areas when we get to them, otherwise we'll get lost. We're looking for a lake of fire, Allison said. That's not narrowing it down, Max pointed to the red glow that illuminated a hill in the distance. I am betting it's over that way, he said. Beyond Freya's fortress was the lava reservoir Max and Allison had initially seen, and beyond that was, well, another lake of fire. Only one of them was on the map, though, and Freya carefully added the other, estimating the number of blocks that the lava covered. Max bounced up and down impatiently, his diamond armor clanking together. Although the only magical thing about him was his sword, he admitted he did like the look of the shiny armor. Freya knelt on the warm ground and spread out two maps. All right. From my own notes on this area, the land to the left of my fortress is barren with a bunch of mobs. I haven't gone right very much, mainly because theirs wasn't what it is essentially a lava sea in the direction. She pointed to similar marks on each map, but from your uncle's marks, it looks like he went directly into the sea. Max made a strangled noise. Why would he do that? Freya glanced up at him. I didn't mean that literally. I mean, he indicates that he wanted to go straight toward the sea. After that, who knows where he went? Maybe he made it under lava vessel. Allison put her hand on Max's shoulder and glared down at Freya. If he were self destructive, he wouldn't have worked so hard to come to the nether. He was a master builder, Max. He's probably fine. She nodded toward the right. We'll go that way then. Freya rolled up both maps and nodded. They started out, sweat stinging their skin. The heat from the rock and lava was constant, and Allison wondered if they were going to die of dehydration before anything else. Now that they were out in the open, it felt both safer and more dangerous than the fortress. They were exposed, but so were all the other beings of this realm. Nothing could sneak up on them, and they took caution to stay clear of the patrolling mobs. What have you fought around here besides the skeletons? Max asked. Don't forget those chicken jockeys, Freya said. I haven't fought the blazes so much as dodged them and shot at them from a distance. There are scarier things than those, of course. Of course there are, because fire creatures aren't bad enough, grumbled Allison. There are ghasts, and they're kind of strange. They throw fire a lot, which you'll see is a theme here. They're gray and a lot of bigger than their blazes, 4 by 4 by 4, by my account. They're so dumb that you can fool them into killing each other, because even though they breathe fire, they're not immune to it. If they all shoot at each other, there might be one left over, but that one won't be a problem to deal with. 4 by 4 by 4? Max said, looking around in panic to see if he could see the massive gray fire bombs. Back in my fortress, we were lucky. We only had skeletons in the library to deal with, Freya continued, knocking an arrow and looking around as they crested the hill nether rack. There are these cubes that like to hang out around the inside fortresses. Want to guess what they are made of? Pumpkins, Max suggested, his voice indicating he didn't believe it for a moment. Fluffy wool? Allison asked. Freya gave her a stern look. All right, fire. They're made out of fire. Everything like everything else. Exactly, or magma, to be more precise. They've got a tough crust that's hard to shoot, and if they are big, they can just hop around and crush you. It's kind of cute from a distance. These red cubes just hopping around. You can kill skeletons and chickens jockeys, manipulate a hast into killing its buddies, but it's best to just avoid the magma cubes. Trust me. Done, Allison said. Totally believe you. I hope we never find out if you're lying to us or not. But you're lucky so far because you haven't seen one of the worst things. Max and Alice interrupted her at the same time. Lucky? Max yelled. The worst? Allison said. You haven't told us the worst one yet? Yeah, Freya said. She paused at the top of the hill and looked around, her bow ready. Nothing looked ready to leap out at them. The worst one is the winter skeleton, the wither skeleton, which can give you a wasting disease. We usually find several mixed in with a mob of skeletons, but I haven't seen one lately. She squinted down the hill, lowered her bow, and pointed. That might be why. On this side of the hill was a vast sea of lava, probably the one that Freya had warned them about. The heat coming off it was incredible, but when they squinted through the hazy air in the distance, they could see is an island of netherrack. A massive tree of nether quartz rose from the stone, and within the crystalline branches sat a tree house made of overworld materials. To the right of the house was a small mushroom farm, with larger mushrooms growing on the left side. It was under these large umbrella like mushrooms that the mob swarmed. There were some skeletons, some zombie pigmen, but, but most were tall, black and spindly things, like skeletons that had been stretched out and perhaps went for a swim in lava. Those are wither skeletons, Freya said. They're all hanging out here. No wonder they haven't been bugging me lately. Uncle Nicholas, Max whispered. Allison didn't say anything. She was too busy counting their supply of arrows. That wraps up chapter 16. I hope that you guys enjoyed. And if you did, hit that like button, and I will see you next time.